Happy... My mic was muted. That is possibly the worst start we've ever had. Welcome to Mind Chat. Happy bloody Christmas.
Welcome to Mind Chat, gentle viewers.
We started and I saw my mic was muted and I just kind of panicked. Never mind. Well, Keith, we haven't done one of these for about a year, have we? How have you been getting on?
Well, it's been a mixed year. Some good things, some not so good. But I've missed you, Philip. I've missed Mind Chat. It was the highlight of each month. I looked forward to it with longing, and I look back with fondness to those sessions of the last 3 to 4 years. It's so good to see you again.
Oh, that's
how are
so
you,
lovely. That's so lovely. I've never really enjoyed it myself. I don't really like you that much, but anyway, there was an overwhelming clamour for Mind Chat to come back, and it's the Christmas special, which is all right. So here we are again, and it's kind of okay. I like the Christmas jumper. Nice Christmas jumper. You made the effort.
I believe there was a letter writing campaign and even talk of a charity single, I think, with Timmy Mallet.
There was.
I believe. Like the one for Doctor Who in the 80s.
Absolutely. More extreme. There were protests on the street. There was... So I've never enjoyed this, but no, I'm only joking. It's good fun. I enjoy our chats. It's a shame you don't have the right philosophical views, but I enjoy chatting to you nonetheless for some reason.
Yes, Philip. Well, I see you've made a little effort there for the Christmas spirit with the... Do
you want to see mine?
Oh, yes, I do remember that one. Yes.
I just think, because Christmas gets so commercial, I want to come back to the true meaning of Christmas, the true spirit of Christmas, which is, of course, revolutionary communism. But,
marketing overpriced leisure wear.
This is from underpaid shirt or something. I'm not being paid to advertise them.
What are we doing today, Philip?
Anyway, it's lovely catching up with you again, but we do have a very exciting guest today, which I'm very excited about, as I'm sure you are. Should we bring them on?
Let's do it.
Our guest today is none other than Robert Lawrence Kuhn. Welcome to Mind Chat, Robert.
Great to see you guys. 2 of my favorite people and 2 of my favorite theories, as opposed as they are.
Oh, that's
welcome, Robert. Welcome indeed.
Good to see my friends.
I'll just briefly introduce you. I don't think you need much introducing. You're probably best known to our viewers as the creator, writer, and host of Closer to Truth, a long-running PBS. I think over 25 years now. I think. PBS television series on the cosmos, mind, and meaning, all the really big themes. And you're also recently written a comprehensive review article on theories of consciousness, a massive survey, almost a book-length survey, really. And you've also, it's called Consciousness, I think, Toward a Taxonomy of Explanations and Implications. It's absolutely exhaustive work, and it's continually updated too. There's an accompanying website with an continually expanded version of the taxonomy, a landscape of consciousness website. I urge everyone to check that out. It's really top notch, written by people who either by the theorists themselves or by people who know their work extremely well. In addition to that, I mean, I could say so much more about Robert. He's written, I think, or edited over 30 books, I believe, including, I've written the names down here, Mystery of Existence, Why There Is Anything at All, I think, with John Leslie. We might talk about that. Closer to Truth, Challenging Current Belief, and these are collections from the Closer to Truth interviews, Closer to Truth, Science, Meaning, and the Future. But beyond that, Robert has many other activities. He's chairman of the Kuhn Foundation, is also an expert on China. And just to throw into the mix, he has a PhD in anatomy and brain research. So what can I say? Welcome, Robert.
It's a real pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation on every level.
Well, thank you. Well, let's to kick us off. You've just recently, a couple of months ago, published a paper in an article in New Scientist magazine, which has the somewhat provocative title, I think, "What 350 Different Theories of Consciousness Reveal About Reality." So I think we'll focus on that. And I suppose my first question is, what drove you to write this article? Why do you think this is such an important topic, and why do you think it's so important to survey all the wide range of positions on it?
Look, it's a great question. My family asks me all the time, considering the amount of effort I've put into focusing on consciousness over the last several years. Of course, consciousness has been at the heart of what has been my life passion, as it is with you guys. That's why I did a doctorate in neuroscience, called brain research at the time. Neuroscience didn't emerge as a term at that point. Shows you my age. But the driving factor in Even Closer to Truth has always been the feeling that consciousness is the best question, or the best entry that we can have to understanding all reality. So my motivation, as megalomaniacal or as crazy as it sounds, is that consciousness is this mechanism to potentially understand all reality, as well as consciousness itself. Now, that does not mean, as it may sound to some people, that I think consciousness is fundamental and it's the ultimate reality. It does not mean that. It may be that, but that's not what I mean. I mean that how you answer that question may determine at least the big split between a materialistic view or a physicalist view of reality and some kind of non-physicalist view. So consciousness, to me, was that mechanism to see that fork in the road, which is why I loved focusing on it. So we focused on it on Closer to Truth. I should mention that Peter Getzells is the co-creator of Closer to Truth and producer director, and he and I worked together for 20 years. Closer to Truth began 25 years ago in a slightly different format. And recently, in the last 20 years, which is recently for me, we have spoken to people around the world and have really enjoyed that. But about 3 years ago, I was asked to write more what they thought was a brief introduction. This is the Journal of Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, to an issue they had planned to have on quantum consciousness. And I said, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I don't have time, because I knew how much work it would be. Make a long story short, after 6 months of bugging me, I realized that this is something I wanted to do in life. And if I'm not going to do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I agreed. But I'll tell you, when I was worried about the amount of work that I had to do, it was less than 5% of what it really turned out to be. And it's a fascinating story in itself, because right now it's 350 theories and counting on the Landscape of Consciousness website. And people ask me, how did you come up with so many theories, or how did you know all these theories? Because a lot of them are very obscure. And I always say that it's not only my doing, because when the article was first published was actually by accident in January of 2024. It was an early draft, and the publisher, Elsevier Science Direct, is the main company. They have a policy that when an article is approved by the peer reviewers, it is immediately published online, even if it's a year later when it'll be published in the actual magazine. And I sort of didn't realize it, and gone through, because I'd made a lot of updates and changes, 3 peer reviews. And the last one, it was immediately published. And I panicked because I was still in the process of writing it. And I begged them to take it down. And they said they don't take it down. They only take it down if there's plagiarism or fraud. And I said, take it down anyway. I don't want this out there. So they finally did. And they told me that everybody's going to think there's some kind of problem with it. And I said, I don't care. And then, it was 6 months later when it was published for real. But what happened during that time, when it was out for 3 weeks, I had a cascade of letters from people all over the world, scientists, philosophers, and just people who were passionate. And many of them were very angry that I had left out their favorite theory. And that process made the paper much richer, because I added about 25 theories that I had never even heard of before. And I studied each one and worked on each one and did the best I can. And that process has continued after the paper was published. When the paper was published, it was a little over 200 theories. And since then, many people have written in, including some, really some very good friends who've given me advice. David Chalmers was terrific in suggesting theories that I had not included, and so the enrichment of the process is actually a community effort. So I always don't want to take the credit for accumulating and collecting these theories, but to give credit to the global consciousness community who are passionate about their theories, and I want to present each one in the best possible way. So that's the motivation, and it continues. And we have an open invitation for any theories that we've left out. Let us know.
Well, it's a fantastic resource. It absolutely is. And if anyone who doesn't know it, I urge you to go and check it out now.
Well, and I mean, let's have a little look at it, because so the paper was out a while back, but more recently, in conjunction with Alex Gomez Marin, you've set up this interactive website, which is absolutely incredible. Well, let's have a little look at it. Hopefully, this doesn't exceed my technical skills. If I just. So if we start with, there's a number of different ways of engaging with the material. Here's the map, right? The landscape of consciousness map. Yes. And I think that is just wonderful for an overview of all of these options.
And so we can that's great you have it. And again, credit to Alex Gomez-Marin for creating the vision for the map. So the top there are 10 big categories. And your viewers know them all: materialism, non-reductive physicalism, quantum theories, information theories, panpsychism. I don't know if you've heard of that one, Philip. And idealism, monism, etc. But the first half of the map is the first half. So if you scroll down up a little bit, that half shows 12 subcategories under materialism. Materialism is the only category that has subcategories, because there are so many of the theories on the landscape, both in the original paper and now. A little less than half, but close to half, are purely materialistic physicalist theories, and they vary very widely in their approach. From strictly neurobiological to an activism to electromagnetic theories to relationship and to relations and to representationalism, first order, second order, etc. A major category is eliminativism and illusionism. I don't know if Keith's heard of that, but in all seriousness, Keith has.
I was going to say I'm very like this paper a lot, but I don't think many people take illusionism very seriously these days. Was it really necessary to include that? I suppose you're being kind, aren't you? Just including everybody.
I always had it as a view. I've always known it mainly through the Churchlands and Dan Dennett a little bit, Nicholas Humphrey, and Keith's work as well. When I did the paper, at one point, in all seriousness, I realized that I had underplayed Keith's approach to illusionism. So I included a couple of paragraphs and quoted his work, secondary to Dan Dennett and others. And at that point, it was a subcategory under materialism, under philosophical. So in the paper, there were 10 categories. One was a philosophical, sort of was a catch-all for things that couldn't be specified, like electromagnetic theories or relationalism. So I put that in that category. And when the paper was published, Dave Chalmers, to credit him again, said that eliminativism and illusionism, although that's not his belief, deserves a full subcategory. And I looked at it again. And so when we did the website, I realized that was right. And individuals like Dennett and Humphrey could be split in terms of their views. And so some people like Dan is in more than one category, because you couldn't just put him in one category. So you will see a handful of people on the landscape in two categories. And then I began to explore with Keith and worked with Keith, and Keith wrote a remarkable article for it, and it's really great. And I actually, Keith, I haven't told you this, but I've used your article, when people write to me, when they're substantial people, and I realize that's a theory worth including, I use your paper as an example of the right format and approach that people should take. I said, you don't have to believe this theory, but the format and the approach and the level is exactly what we want on the landscape of consciousness. And it's really great. I will say this, though, to contradict Philip and to show my own internal complexity and perhaps contradiction. When I finished that first when the first draft was published accidentally, people wrote into me. You said, "Yeah, I appreciate all this. I like all the theories, but what is your theory? It's not. You haven't told us what your theory is." And I said to some people, again by email, that I don't want to say my theory, because if I say my theory, it'll look like I'm biasing everyone else towards what I believe. First of all, what I believe is not that important. A lot of other people, I don't want to bias it. And when I do each theory, I mean, I spent like 2 full days or 2 full nights really on each theory, and I inhabited the theory, and I pretended that theory was my theory, and I wanted the whole world to know about it properly. And so each theory I presented as best I really could, and fooled myself into thinking I believed that theory. Then I moved on to the next one. And so I didn't want to give the impression that I have a particular theory. But then someone else said, if you don't do that, you have a hidden agenda. And then everybody's going to think that you're hiding it and it's being very subtle. So it was a rock and a hard place. So what I decided to do in the final paper is, at the very end, say what I believe. But I made this point. I said the paper, as it was originally published, was 175,000 words. Now it's about double that, but it's 175,000. And my theory, I've taken 33 words to explain it, with a 39-word footnote, and it's 72 words out of 175,000. And that's the amount of confidence I have in my theory as opposed to everyone else. But I'll tell you what I believe. So I said in the paper, all right, here's what I believe. And it was sort of a non-physicalist theory between maybe dualism or idealism. Then I put a footnote, and then I said, as contradictory as this is going to sound, the second approach that I would have would be some sort of a quantum approach, which was different than I had expected, because I was always extremely negative about quantum theories. I gave my good friend Stuart Hameroff a very hard time on Closer to Truth in the early days of doing that. But doing the paper, and we have like 25 different theories of quantum theories of consciousness, and they're all very, very, very different from each other. So not just the famous ones. But I said that would be my second choice. And I said, if that's wrong, my third choice, as contradictory as this may sound, will be an eliminative illusionism approach to consciousness, maybe matched with some sort of representationalism. So I had these 3 levels, and they're completely opposed to each other. But I learned during doing the paper myself, and have more respect, not belief yet, not belief at all, but more respect for illusionism.
That is really interesting. Really good to hear your perspective. I didn't know you were interested in quantum stuff. And just to correct the record, I am of course joking. I think it's great the way you've got it. I think it's good. I think it's important that you've got more materialist positions, because that is still, unfortunately, the dominant view. And but you've covered a range of non-physicalist as well. And of course, it's you do need to include illusionism. Actually, illusionism is probably my preferred physicalist view, actually, as well. So, but yeah, it's a really great job. Just go, Keith.
I was just going to say, I think what Robert was articulating there, the need to explore each of these positions in detail and really inhabit the mindset of the theorist is so important, because I don't think we're going to solve this by any sort of deductive argument. What we have to do is find the picture that fits best. You know, it's going to be a holistic, global decision, made in the light of how everything hangs together in this particular framework. And to judge that, you need to really inhabit that worldview and see what it would be like to live in a world that is like this.
Yeah, and to me, that's very exciting and very energizing to see that. It's not. I'm not depressed that there's this proliferation of theories. I'm energized by that. I really like that a lot. I should make the point that the reason there are more theories of materialism than all the others, almost as much as all the others put together, is not just that that people think about it more. Why is that the case? And I try to think about why is that the case. And the reason is that once you have this split between a physicalist and a non-physicalist view, and we try to use our best reasoning scientific method, you really can't make that much progress with a non-physicalist view in terms of explicating it further. And the reason is that the way we make progress is generally a scientific approach. And if you have a non-physicalist starting point, then the scientific method is questionable at best, and it is limited. And so you have a limitation. You have a capacity for philosophical and rational thinking, but not the scientific method of observation, experiment, repeatability, etc. And so therefore, it's more limited, the non-physicalist here. When you're in a physicalist world, and if that's your assumption, then you can make progress, or you think you make progress, because you can use a scientific method to discern different ways of approaching. So it's a very logical kind of overview of the division of theories of consciousness.
That's really interesting. I guess the way I tend to think about things here, and I wonder what you think of this, Robert, is I tend to make a division between the scientific task and the philosophical task. So the scientific task, as I see it, is tracking the neural correlates of consciousness, or more generally working out which kinds of physical activity go along with which kinds of consciousness, or in general, which kinds of physical activity are necessary and sufficient for consciousness at all. And then the philosophical task is why? Why is consciousness and brain activity correlated at all? And I sort of think, it's not a sharp binary. It's not as black and white as that might suggest, and they can influence each other. But I tend to think in general, these are sort of separate. So the scientific data about correlation is sort of neutral on which philosophical theory, physicalism, dualism, panpsychism, illusionism, whatever. But that would seem to differ from what you've just said in the way. So I suppose I would think that, yes, the scientific task. So you sort of said physicalism, you can kind of make more scientific work on, or something. I guess the way I think about things, and maybe you disagree, or it's the scientific task we can make scientific progress on, but that's sort of distinct from the philosophical task of which of these many theories go. What do you think?
I don't think we disagree. My approach was focused more narrowly than yours. My approach is what is necessary and sufficient for consciousness. That's the limitation. You use necessary and sufficient in the physicalist explanation, and then the philosophical is why. That's not what I'm doing. I'm asking what is necessary and sufficient. Now, necessary, I think virtually every theory thinks the brain or some sort of a physiological expression is necessary. I mean, some people believe it's not the brain, it's just life itself. And so we can, that's a physicalist, within physicalist argument. The why question, which you've asked famously, Philip, is entirely legitimate, but that goes beyond what I do. This is not a why question. A why question leads to a whole other approach. I'm just dealing with the necessary, and not so much necessary. It's necessary and sufficient. And it's not clear that materialism is both necessary and sufficient. It certainly seems to be necessary, at least on the vast majority of theories. Certain, obviously, idealistic and some dualistic theories it's not even necessary. But so the scientific question is what's necessary, and the then question that I'm asking is that also sufficient? Now, if I and this panoply of theories deals with all the ways to address what is necessary and sufficient, focusing on the sufficient. Even if that gets solved, your approach, dividing into the philosophical reason of why, is a totally different question that I deliberately don't address. I mean, I'm trying to be as narrow as possible in articulating these theories. So I don't deal with like perception and intention and wakefulness and intelligence. And I distinguish all of those. I said, I'm not talking about any of those things, because a lot of those things are associated with consciousness and various, I quote Marvin Minsky, who said, consciousness is a suitcase term. Whatever people want, they throw into the suitcase. I try to be as clear as possible. I'm only dealing with phenomenal consciousness, not access consciousness, not perception, not all these other categories. And now I would differentiate. I'm not dealing with the why question, just dealing with what's necessary, but most importantly, what's necessary and sufficient.
What do you think, Keith?
Well,
That's very helpful.
I like the suitcase analogy. I remember that from the paper. And if Dan Dennett were here now, I think he'd probably say something like this. Well, that's a nice analogy. All of these things we put in the suitcase: awareness, perception, self-monitoring, all kinds of self-representation systems, metacognition, all sorts of stuff. And as you put it in the New Scientist article, you want to take out all of those other things and just leave the pure phenomenal consciousness. I think Dan would say once you've taken all of those things out, there's nothing left.
Right.
And phenomenal consciousness is just a kind of word for that whole portmanteau of stuff. And essentially, I think that's one way of looking at illusions. That there are all these various psychological processes, and we kind of represent them all to ourselves as something additional. It's like seeing the example now, but it's like looking at the activity of a city and thinking there's a sort of cityness to it all, in addition to the activities of all the people and all the buildings and all the traffic systems and the communication systems and everything. It's just our kind of holistic grasp of all of that activity that we're gesturing at. And if you took out all of the individual bits, there'd be no city left, there'd be nothing left in the suitcase. I see what you're doing with the analogy, and we have this strong sense that there's something else in addition to all that, and that's precisely where illusion comes in, because I say that sense of there being something else that needs explaining, that's precisely the illusion. And then, of course, we have to put something in the suitcase to explain why there's that illusion of there being something else in it. There has to be some psychological process there that's explaining that. But I think that's a really nice analogy, the suitcase one, for getting to bring that point into focus.
Yeah, good point. I agree with that.
I've changed. So just to stay on this amazing website, so there are 5 different ways of exploring these 350 theories. So there's what, the landscape grid, the landscape categories, all landscape theories, landscape map that we just looked at, and then here the final one, interactive visualizations, which I still haven't fully explored yet. But it's really is an incredible. So I believe you haven't quite got all of them up yet, but there's a good proportion of them.
Yes, some of them
Do you
are
want to say
very.
a little bit more about how the website works or how we can
Sure,
explore these?
it was really fun working with our team and designers to come up with all these different approaches. As you said, the map that Alex did is very clear and shows that each of those on the website, when you go to landscape map, every term there is clickable. So you click on each one and you go immediately to the theory page. If you click on, goth under panpsychism, you go to a whole page on Philip. You click on Frankish, you get to a whole page on illusionism, and so that's then we have different ways of approaching it. For example, we have a long list. I don't know if you want to. It's called all landscape theories. You can go to the homepage and then all landscape theories, and you can then scroll where each one is just in a long line, so you get a different flavor for the whole approach. I don't know if that's easy to do or not.
Yes, it's coming up now. Sorry, there we go.
Okay, yeah. So you can just scroll quickly through all of those theories. So this lists them individually. You better do it faster because it's going to take a long time to get to the end. There we go.
Wow.
So that's it. And then you go to the bottom. You go to the very bottom. Then there's the you see the 5 ways, and you can click on each one. I see. So you can then go to the grid is interesting, which is the first one, and that does the same thing in a grid format. So you go to a major category, and then you have all the theories across the line. And then you can once again then the interactive, which is the last one. Go down to the bottom and then hit.
I'm glad you've got the correct theory there as well. It's always good to. Sorry, I got distracted. Yeah, go down to what? Sorry.
The last one on the right, the interactive.
Oh yeah.
And so what this is a very interesting thing. It was the vision was created by a Turkish information designer. You can read his name there. His name is Deniz Sem Oglu. And he has done these interactives with other kinds of things, and he volunteered to try to work on how we could do this for all the theories. And again, we can't do all of them because you need a lot of external data to be able to drive these diagrams. And there are about 4 different kinds. Just to give you one simple example, we plotted all the numbers in Google and Google Scholar, and compared each of them. We have a graph on that, and so that gives you a sense of how the theory is viewed by the general public and by the scholarly community. And in most cases, they're pretty similar, but in some cases, there's a big divergence. And so that's a very interesting one. Another.
What's the question of a bit? Can you give an example of a big divergence? I'm always interested.
You have to go to that website. I think some of the non-physicalist theories have a big diversion where the popular would be much higher than the scholarly, which is sort of understandable. But perhaps the most important or most interesting one to me is the one on scale, which plots the place on in the hierarchy of being, from the fundamental below quantum level to the ultimate cosmological or God level, and where the critical nexus or node where consciousness takes place, and that's plotted against where the theories are. So you can see in some of them, you have to refresh maybe to see. So yeah, that's the Google Scholar.
I'm a bit rubbish with technology.
Yeah.
How do I get back to scale?
Go to the first one. We see the first one. And you can pull these apart. They're all clickable. You can get information on them. So it's really, really a delightful thing. But as I said, can't be all of them because we need a lot of external data. We plot about 10 10 data points for each one. For example, how important is the brain in the theory? And we plot that against the order of magnitude of where the theory takes place. So it's a different way of explaining it. And that, I should say, is a work in process, because people can critique the assumptions we're making in these things. And that's the whole purpose of the website, is to be interactive. It's not definitive. If people want to correct what we've said, we put this wrong, we want that. We have invitations to people not just to add new theories, but help us understand where we may have made errors here or in our estimate. So it's really designed for this interactiveness, but to give people different ways to approach the subject, and that's part of the vision of the landscape of consciousness, to give this engaging sense of working with the entire global consciousness community, scientific, philosophical, theological, different, shall we say, advocacy groups who are passionate about a particular theory, most of them non-physical, but things that I rejected when I was first doing the paper is so outlandish or so bizarre that it didn't pass my what we call Overton window, where I feel comfortable even presenting it. But some people criticize me for not doing so, and fairly sophisticated people. So I realized I needed to include that. Now I still have, it's not totally open season. There are still some I do not include, but I want to be more inclusive than exclusive, and make that part of the point of engaging the entire global consciousness communities.
May I ask something that occurred to me, that the website is, as you say, being continually updated, and partly that is, you say, to include more information and to fill out the information that you have. Will there also be some, but I assume this is going to be a long-term project, this is going to continue. Will there be some facility for tracking changes in the landscape over time as one theory perhaps becomes more popular or another one less popular? That would be a really interesting thing to do.
That's a very, very good idea, and we're still in beta. By the way, I haven't said that, because there are still some technical things that we need to improve the site, make it a little bit more easy. And what I want to do, which is not complete, I should mention this. Keith alluded to it earlier, that the theories are, I'd say, of the theories in the original paper, about 25 or 30%, only that level, were either written by or authenticated by the original theorist. All the rest I did. And in some cases, when I did the original theory, for those people I knew personally, I sent it to them ahead of time and saying, I think this is going to be published, because I still wasn't sure, because the Journal of Biophysics and Molecular Biology, to put in all these non-physicalist theological theories seemed a bit odd. And in fact, the first peer reviewers say you should take them all out. And I said, if I were in your position, I'd reject this paper because it has that. If I were you, I don't know who you are, but I agree with that, but I can't do that. I have to include all the theories, the panpsychism and theological dualism, and the Hindu view and the Buddhist view and the Christian and the Jewish. I have to, and the indigenous view. I have to include all of that. I'm going to do this one time in my life, and I'm going to do it where it satisfies my broad interest. And if you don't want to publish it, I completely understand and won't feel bad, and try to find another publisher. If I can't, I'll publish it myself in some way. But to their credit, they let me do all of that. So I was able to send it to people. Most people made a few changes, but not many, because I'm quoting their works. I mean, I'm not making things up. I'm doing my best to present their theory properly. But a few made substantial changes. Nicholas Humphrey did, Antonio Damasio did. And to Antonio, for example, I apologized for getting it wrong. He said, no, you didn't get it wrong. It's just you used my papers from 3 years ago, and here's my newer paper. This is my newer paper. So that's terrific. That's exactly what we want to do. We want the theorists themselves to update their own works with new references, with new quotes. And so what we've not done yet, because we're still in this beta phase, is writing to the people I don't know, which is still more than half of the theories. I'd say about half now are either authenticated by or written by the theorists themselves, but there are still about half that I've not done that because I don't know them personally. But over the next few months, I want to write to everyone who hasn't updated and say, look, here's what it is. You can update it. You can add quotes. You can add references, change it. Let me know. And whenever you like it, let me know. And then we put on each theory what we call verified, who verifies. And so with your theory, which is wonderful, Keith, on illusionism, you did it and you verified it, that this, and we gave a date that you verified it. Most of the theories do not yet have that, but ultimately we want to have that. Everyone to verify their own thing and update it as they have new references. So it'll be constantly current. That's the vision.
And I was just wondering if at the same time as you're updating it, I hope the old data won't be lost, though. It'd be good if there was an archive function so that we could see how people's views had changed, and perhaps how the popularity of theories had changed over time, and you could go back and look at what the landscape was 5 years ago and compare to what it is now. That's
a great idea. I'll have to tell our team how to do that.
Right, I don't know how to do it, but I think
right now we want to be sure the landscape, is robust and continually working.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that's a great idea. Great idea.
I might have found one missing. Just look. Monadic panpsychism, is that in the what I'm thinking of is this sort of Leibniz inspired view that S. Siddharth, who's an Indian philosopher, and Nino Kadic,
yes, he has that view,
have been defending in Zagreb. Basically, the idea, a kind of form of panpsychism where my mind, not just my mind, but to take an example, my mind is just a single particle. So my consciousness is the consciousness, is an intrinsic property of a single particle. So, panpsychism has this problem, the combination problem. Okay, how do you get these particle consciousnesses combined? And the monadic panpsychists say, we don't need to do this. We just say it's one particle. So actually, I've just this week, just before you committed, I'm going to co-write something with Nino on this, because
as soon as you do, send it to me. I'll summarize it, send it to you for approval. You got it. You got an open invitation to add a new theory. I really like that a lot. I should add that monism is one category by itself, and obviously there's a high correlation between monisms and panpsychism in different ways. And many people want their theory. It's very funny. I'd say dozens of people have written to me want their theory to be a totally new category. It's completely different than any of the others. It's not materialist, it's not it's their own category. And of course, we don't allow that. But many, even they do that, they want to be monists. And so a large percentage like that idea, but they have characteristics more of the other categories. So I'm trying to be very restrictive on monism. So monistic panpsychism, I put in panpsychism, is great. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing we're looking at. We also have, some odd theories, and I don't say that in a pejorative way, because I think the ultimate theory will be odd. But for example, Arnold Zukov, who has this universalism that we're all. His theory is really a personal identity more than consciousness, but it reflects on consciousness. That's why I included it, and then I asked him to do it, and I wrote it, and he edited, and it's authenticated by him, to where everybody's consciousness is the same thing. And so he uses a statistical argument that we can criticize, but it's an interesting approach. And so each of these theories, I think, adds a different sense. And so monadic panpsychism adds how you deal with the combination problem. And you may not agree with it, but it's a way to think about it. So it expands it. So, Philip, you have an absolute commitment and an assignment and a responsibility. As soon as you've written it, please send it to me.
Okay,
And
I will do. Yeah, because
it goes in.
I was just reminded about like 10 years ago when I was barely finished my PhD, and I did a plenary talk at the Tucson conference, and I just had this wacky idea. Actually, I was thinking about it with Hedda Hasselmerk and Jonathan Simons. It was when I was a Chalmers postdoc, and we were all hanging out together, and we got a bit drunk one night, and we had this crazy idea that you could be one particle but multiply located. So there's like, so, you know, because you think that one particle is not going to do much, is it? But if it's multiply located, so you're in trillions of locations, then maybe. So me and Hedda and Jonathan Simon, yes, this is the answer, this is the truth. And I think we woke up the next morning hungover, and Jonathan and Hedda were like, nah, this is not. But I was like, no, come on. And I did this one talk on it and forgot about it. And now we're talking to Nino. We're going to maybe write something
Good,
including that in the monadic view. But anyway,
I think you're going the wrong way there, Flip. I think you should go back to universalism. I always like universal combination. That was my favorite one. I was always fond of that. I think was it one paper you had on universal combination?
So everything's conscious. Yeah.
Every mereological combination of particles is conscious. Is a macro consciousness.
I mean, Luke Roloff's he's a panpsychist. It tends to be the more reductionist panpsychist thing. That's probably why you like it, Keith. But Luke thinks everything is conscious, but not everything has unified consciousness. So he thinks the table is conscious, but it has radically disunified consciousness. And so it's only special things that, anyway, we don't need to go into the ins and outs of panpsychism. No, I want a category all to Goff's panpsychism, one category all to myself. I'm going to demand that, and you'll be hearing from my lawyers.
It's 351 now, anyway.
Anyway, I'm joking. Well, I want to ask you about another big topic, but Keith, do you want any more on the paper before we move to another big topic?
I could talk all day about the paper, I think I know where you're going to go now, and I'm keen to go there because I think you probably a lot of people think of me as a very sort of person who's not very moved by the mystery of things, but I think the thing we're going to talk about now, if I've anticipated correctly, is something that really does puzzle me and intrigue me. And I'm not saying I'm going to go for anything very metaphysically extravagant, but it's certainly something, a deep mystery, I think. So if I'm anticipating correctly. So go ahead, Philip.
Okay. Well, I'm hesitant because it's such a big topic. Just to say before I move on to this, we will have some time at the end for audience questions if some people are asking questions, but if you save them till the end, because I'll lose track of them. Well, there's another big topic you're fascinated by, Robert. You're fascinated by so many interesting. You're a big picture guy, big questions guy, which is what I love. But the other big question, perhaps it's the biggest question of all. Why is there something rather than nothing? So this is a topic I'm obsessed by myself. Well, where are you up to with this? Well, I guess what motivated you initially to engage with that biggest of all questions? Is it even answerable, do you think? What's your latest thinking on this?
First of all, I divide the world into two parts. One part are those people who are passionate about the ultimate existence question, why is there something rather than nothing, and those who are not. And the first category is a lot smaller than the second category, for sure. So my story, it takes a minute to tell, was for several decades of my life, I would say 5 decades. I remembered that when I was 12 years old, sleeping at a camp, one night I had a thought that was so frightening, 12 years old, that I desperately tried to put it out of my mind. I was so scared. And it worked. And for decades, I couldn't remember what it was. And then 4 or 5 decades later, I realized it was that question, what if there were nothing? Because the instant just seemed like nothing was an easier, more simplistic reason or nature of existence that you don't have to explain nothing, but you have to explain if there's something. If there was nothing, nothing to explain. So nothing seemed more obvious. And from that point on, it became a very serious fascination. So Closer to Truth, really, as a vision, was founded on 2 principles. I don't have a lot of other areas. I mean, we do a lot of other things in philosophy of biology and various exploring various philosophies of religion, etc. But the two core areas are raw existence, which is why is there something rather than nothing, and the nature of consciousness as this vehicle to probe the nature of ultimate reality. So those are the two foundations on which Closer to Truth is fundamentally built. And so we've devoted many episodes to that, talking to everybody, asking the same kinds of questions, but getting slightly different answers, trying to see how the question evolves in so many different ways. As I said, many people would, even who've thought about it, reject the question as either nonsensical or doesn't have meaning, and is self-refuting, and all of which are legitimate possible arguments. But as I wanted to develop it, I wrote a first article on trying to approach this by how do you approach it? And I said, we can't approach the question, but rather let's just see why this universe came about. Maybe that'll help us. So I did a kind of a mini taxonomy on different theories of cosmogenesis. From one universe to multi-universes to non-physical explanations, whether it's God or consciousness, etc. And then, as a result of the feedback to that paper, what I did was seeing that the different definitions of nothing, what people mean by nothing, are very different. And so it was a similar thing to consciousness. I wanted to narrow and understand what we mean by nothing. Because people had very different views. I mean, the Buddhist view is very different than the quantum physicist view, which is very different than the theological view. So what do people mean by nothing? And so I did this very short paper, which is one of my personal favorites of everything I've done. It's only 3 or 4 pages. But what it deals with is it gives 9 levels of nothing. So 9 different kinds of definitions of nothing, going from the, if you pardon the expression, the least amount of nothing to the maximal amount of nothing. So number 1 is the least amount of nothing, or the most amount of some things that people call nothing. And then the last one is nothing so nothing that it is probably logically inconsistent. And so it goes from the other. So very, very quickly, if you want me to give, I'll try to do it if I can remember it properly. So number 1 is just that you don't see anything, but everything is the same. There's just nothing there, nothing in the box. That's the most simplistic nothing. And the second one is that that nothing, not only don't you see anything, but there's no matter in it. Now we know matter energy equivalent, so that doesn't make sense. And the next one is there's a nothing, but there's no it's just existing space-time, but there's no empty, it's empty of all matter and energy. And so that kind of nothing. And then the next one is, yes, there's no matter and there's no energy, but that's a permanent, that's always been that case. It's by necessity as opposed to contingency. Then the 5th level of nothing is is the quantum physicist definition of nothing, and that is there is nothing, there's no space and time, but there is the laws of quantum physics, or whatever is more fundamental that drives the laws of quantum physics, and that engenders all the things that we see, all the particulars of this universe through quantum tunneling, and all the different theories that many of your viewers are familiar with. And so I point out that when physicists say you can get something from nothing, they're level 5 in my hierarchy of 9. So when they say they're getting something from nothing, there are 4 more levels below them that they don't even consider. So number 5. So number 6 eliminates the laws of physics. So not only is there no space-time and no mass energy, but also there are no pre-existing laws of physics that could generate space-time or mass energy. Okay, now where are we? We eliminated the physical, so now we have to get to the non-physical. So level number 7 is not only where there's no space-time, no matter energy, and no pre-existing laws of physics. Not only that, there are now no non-physical things or kinds that are concrete. And so there's no God, there's no consciousness, there's no cosmic consciousness, no possibility. So it's everything non-physical and everything, as well as everything physical, anything concrete doesn't exist. Now that's number 7. Now that may be the limit in logical space, but then I take it 2 levels further, which are debatable whether this is even possible. And so level 8 becomes not only there are no physical and non-physical concrete objects like God and consciousness, none of that, but now there's no abstract objects. There's no mathematics, no logic, no sets, no propositions, all the things that we call abstract objects. Now, many philosophers would say that is an impossibility. Some would say that it's possible because maybe it's abstract objects are language related or fictionalism, and a lot of different explanations between nominalists. You got familiar with the argument, and realists about abstract objects. But level 8 says there are no abstract objects. And then finally, level 9 is what could be more nothing than no abstract objects, as well as no concrete objects, physical and non-physical. And I put there are no possibilities. So number 9 is possibilities. And not only isn't there any physical and non-physical concrete objects, there are no abstract objects, but now there are not even possibilities. And I'm certainly open to the argument that is impossible. There can always be possibilities, that there's a logical contradiction there. But those are the 9 levels. But I always like to point out that when physicists talk about something from nothing, they're only at level 5.
I love that. I love it. I love that pitch. Much ado about nothing. You should have called it much ado about nothing. You know.
Wow. I feel like there should be a Woody Allen joke that then there's level 10, which is only found in certain areas of New Jersey or something like that.
But it's a similar thing to the consciousness paper in a way. It's let's take this huge question that seems sort of unfathomable, impossible, intangible, but get a little bit more precise about it. Maybe we won't solve it. Let's get some taxonomy. Let's get some distinctions. I think that's the way to make philosophical progress. It's great. The abstract object stuff was just reminding me William Lane Craig, who I debated recently, and we're debating in person in May actually. He is a fictionalist about abstract objects, because he wants God to be the creator of everything.
Right.
He doesn't want these abstract objects that have to exist and then God's got nothing to do with. God didn't create them. So,
in essence, if you have abstract objects and God is almost subservient to the abstract object, because if God is love or whatever, then love becomes an oversight of God. There are a lot of different explanations that the abstract object emerges from God. There's a whole panoply of explanations, but I like putting these questions on the table, and so we see.
I think I'd be more sympathetic in my theistic side as building them into God, the necessary abstract objects, maybe, rather than. But let me just share with you briefly where I end up with this question and see what you think of it. I think with these cosmological arguments for God, from there must be God, God must exist to explain why there's something rather than nothing. I think I buy stage 1, but not stage 2. It's my usual habit of annoying both sides, the theists and the atheists. So I annoy the atheists because I think, I'm persuaded by the first stage. I'm persuaded there must be something that has to exist that explains the existence of everything else, a necessary being. Otherwise, there's no way of explaining why there's something rather than nothing. There must be, and I don't think we can understand how there could be something that has to exist. Anything we can imagine, it might not have existed, but maybe we just don't grasp the essence of God. Maybe if you really grasp the essence of God, you'd see, oh my God, that has to exist, but it's just totally beyond human comprehension. Anyway, so I grasp the first stage, that there must be something that has to exist. Where I annoy the theists, where I get off the bus there, is when they try to say, and it must have the godlike characteristics, it must be. an agent. It must be a conscious mind. It must be all knowing, all powerful, perfectly good. There it starts to sound like I'm not buying these arguments. So I just buy the minimal claim. There must be a necessary being, but who the hell knows what it? Maybe it's the quantum vacuum. You know, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah,
what
look,
do you think of
I
that?
conclude this paper by saying almost exactly the same thing. So very much in alignment. I said the
Great
ultimate,
minds think alike.
the ultimate answer is, and I make it a bifurcation, just like we did in consciousness, physicalists and non-physicalists, and trying to have a narrow understanding with the question, why is there something around? The ultimate explanation has to be a necessary being. And we say being is some kind of existent. We don't mean a being that's a personal being, and necessary existent, or brute fact. I mean, it's one or the other. I mean, it's either a contingent brute fact.
It's not satisfying.
It's not satisfying, but yeah, why does the universe have to satisfy you, Philip? Where do you read that the universe has to satisfy you?
It's being mean otherwise.
Well, tough noogies. Bertrand Russell, in his famous argument with Father Copleston, it was asked this question, and basically he said the universe just is, and that's all, and then sat down. I mean, that was the totality of his answer, which kind of is a brute fact kind of answer, and that ends the conversation, which is what he wanted to do in that case.
Can I want to ask Keith what he thinks, but sorry, can I just say one thing about that famous debate? What was it, 1948, I think, between Copleston and Russell, which was a big moment sort of after the war, a big exciting moment having this. And one thing I've thought about that, actually, I've been writing about it in my new book. I think history has been more on the side of Copleston the theist in that, in one respect at least, because at the time it was like Russell was the newfangled stuff. He kept referring to the modern logic and saying, this theistic guy, he doesn't understand the modern logic. But Russell's idea of the modern logic was that necessity and analyticity go together. And I would say that's pretty outdated now. People are more open to Kripke Putnam influence idea that necessity and analyticity can come apart. And that was kind of what Copleston the theist was pushing. He was saying, we can have the essence of something. It's not that's necessity, not to do with analyticity. And Russell's like, oh, you don't understand modern logic. But actually, history has proven the theist was right on that one. But anyway, Keith, what do you think?
I agree. I'm not sure proven is the right word, but it certainly is a legit. That debate is really classic. When I read it years ago, first time I read it, it was totally modern. I mean, it's a wonderful expression.
Well, Philip, I love how selective you are in the bits of Russell that you admire. That's very nice. I love this topic, because when I think about the mind and consciousness, I feel I've got lots of tools. What Dan Dennett called thinking tools that I can use to get a grip on it. And some of them make me metaphysical, though I don't think we really need all the heavy-duty metaphysics. But I have the tools to think about it. But when I try and think about this issue, and it's not just about the issue of why there's something rather than nothing. It's not just about why there's something rather than nothing, but why what there is so immensely particular and seemingly contingent in an astronomical number of ways. Why should it be just like this? When I try to think about this, I realize I don't have the tools to think about it, and I don't find the tools that are offered by philosophers or theologians adequate. I think we might as well just go with Russell as far as the other tools we have. Maybe that will change. Maybe science will help us with this. I love to make this point that it's only 100 years ago since we discovered that there are other galaxies beyond our own, and at that moment, Hubble's discovered that moment, our conception of the universe expanded hugely, and so we're only a short way into doing cosmology, and we still have a lot to learn about fundamental physics and so on. So maybe we'll start to get some tools.
Look,
I just don't have them.
Many theoretical physicists, when I first started with Closer to Truth, had the belief that ultimately we will find that the laws of physics are of necessity, that there's no other way that they could be, and that would be would be a long way towards the answer. May not convince everyone, but it would be. And that has been shown to be, at least at this point, not correct. That the most fundamental laws of physics could have been done in many, many, many different ways, and there's no seemingly necessity to it. That seems like at least at this point, a losing argument. But even, when I spoke to Steven Weinberg, who I greatly respected, and he was, of course, a classic atheist, he said, ultimately, even if we could find the ultimate laws of physics, we will never be able to answer why this rather than that. It's such a profound thought that he said, we'll never be able to say, why is it that rather than something else? And that ends it. I should mention that Peter Van Inwagen, a great philosopher and a good friend, has some very interesting arguments about something rather than nothing. And he has originally he had the thought that there are an infinite number of ways there could be something. Obviously, we can make an infinite number of things, and there's only one way that there could be nothing. And so if you asked what is the percentage of one, which is the one way of nothing as the numerator, and the denominator an infinite number of something, so 1 over infinity equals 0. So there's no possibility there would be nothing. He later changed that, because when I argued with him originally on this, I think in 2007 I did our first interview. I said, well, what you're assuming is that that you're weighting all the somethings and the nothing at exactly the same level. And that's a massive assumption. In other words, my assumption would be that I'd weight 90% to the nothing and 10% to all the somethings. And so I get the wrong answer, but that would be my weightings. He's later changed that. He had a paper, I think 2015, really good paper on this, where he became much more precise. The same kind of answer, but it was something like, if it is possible for there to be something, then it is impossible for there to be nothing. And then he had several different ways of articulating that, which is a similar kind of argument, but it's much more precise. And I really like that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I still have this intuition that nothing is more probable than something, but obviously the world proves me wrong.
It has a habit of doing that to us, doesn't it?
We could go on forever with this fascinating topic again. But Keith, you wanted to ask a few questions about Closer to Truth, which we all love so much. I've learned so much.
Absolutely. Well, let me just, maybe if people, if I'm aware that time's moving on, so if anyone who's listening wants to ask a question, maybe they can pop it in the chat.
Yeah, if you could put Q, the letter Q, and then put your question in, and then I'll keep an eye on them while Keith asks a few questions.
I just thought I would ask Robert. I mean, you've interviewed so many amazing people, some of the most important thinkers of our time. I just wondered if you had any ones that had stood out to you as particularly inspiring, insightful, not just in their theoretical views, but also in their approach to these questions, because I think there's a matter of sort of sensibility in how you engage with these issues. Some people see them as narrowly technical, and they sort of try and do what they can on that. But there's also, I think we need to retain this. I'm keen to retain this sense of wonder in the face of these questions. So I wondered if you I know it's an invidious question, but are there any you might single out for particular mention?
It's a wonderful question, and I've been asked it before, and my answer is always, why don't you ask me which one of my 3 children I like best? It's a similar kind of question, and I don't mean that frivolously, because when I prepare for an interview with individuals, no matter who they are at whatever level, at that point in my thinking, I am totally engaged with that person's thinking. I want to understand it. And I try to fool myself. I know I'm fooling myself into thinking I want to be able to answer all the questions I ask that person about her or his theory. And of course I can't do that, but I want to work up to the point where I think I can. And so I have this feeling of just really wanting to deeply understand something. And to me, I say I luxuriate in this experience. And so it's an equivalent. Now, some I'd say, without mentioning names, I will have learned something new, that when I studied so hard and understood all their books, a lot of times I'll be talking to theorists, scientists, philosophers, and I'll have read their 20-year-old paper, 2 nights ago, and they haven't read it in 20 years. So I'll know something more than they do about how they ordered things or something. But I love luxuriating in understanding the different views, and so it's a very way of it. It's almost thinking like a very discrete approach to time. If I look at the whole block of the more than 5,000 interviews I've done, counting most people, I'll do 10 or so, 12 in a session. So more than 500 people over 25 years, well more than 5,000 videos. They're short, 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes each on very specific topics. If I look at the whole line, it's meaningless. Each individual point has its own aspect to it. And in a few cases, I will, on the spot, learn something new or have a different approach. Even if I think it's totally wrong, if it's different than what I thought, that to me is an enriching experience. And that's happened often. And that's the highlight of my experiences, when I can see a view that I never appreciated before. I mean, in all seriousness, with illusionism, I knew it for years, but until doing this paper, I really didn't understand it fully. And so while I disagree with its conclusion, I think, although it's number 3 on my list, it is number 3. While I disagree with its conclusion, I have been so enriched by understanding that. And so that's been seriously a great pleasure for me, as well as with cosmopsychism and all of Philip's creative stuff. I mean, in the same way.
I think that's a fantastic answer to the question I asked. Thank you.
There's a lot of great comments that have been putting up of people really appreciating this, the how you've explored all these views, and very well. But we'd better, if we're running out of time, I guess we've got so many questions people want to ask. We've got Mark O'Brien here, friend of the show, who's very impressive. Mark's never studied philosophy formally, but is self-taught to an incredible level, such that he's just published a paper on quantum immortality in a very respected academic journal. Very, very rare and impressive. Okay, Mark asks, my own view is functionalist illusionist, but not materialist, because I think the mind is an abstract structure and not a physical thing. Is this novel, and would it fit into the current taxonomy? I think Mark's got a view, a sort of similar to Max Tegmark, that the universe is a mathematical entity, and indeed all mathematical entities exist, and we're just one of them. And so in a sense, it's maybe not physicalism, but close to physicalism and being an illusionist. What do you think? Where does that fit in?
Look, it's interesting. I would, in terms of fitting into the taxonomy of consciousness, I would think that it is a legitimate theory, as you've told me. Mark, please, my email is on the website and on the consciousness paper. Please send me your paper, and we'll work on it, and we'll work it in. And it would fit very, very well in the quantum consciousness, because, as I said, we have 25 different theories, and they're so radically different from each other that it's a very legitimate position, a very legitimate theory to take seriously.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, David Simpson asks for Robert. You mentioned panpsychism, quantum consciousness, and illusionism as your 3 favorite views. Assume we know it's one of these 3. What was your Bayesian credence of each view? I thought it was just quantum and illusionism, actually, rather than, I think we maybe just mentioned panpsychism to be nice to me. But anyway, what's your Bayesian credence in each of those views?
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned panpsychism actually.
No, I did.
I felt bad about not mentioning it, but
That's all right. I've got a thick skin.
I actually, I guess in my way of thinking, I don't make as much a distinction between panpsychism and idealism that you guys in the field do.
I don't
They
either, really.
blend together to me fairly well. And so what I said was my first view is kind of a dualistic, idealistic view. I mean, that's if you force me to say, at gunpoint, what is your theory? I would make all these qualifications like my theory doesn't matter, and 33 words out of 175,000 shows you my own confidence and my own belief. But once, at the end of the day, after I make all my excuses, I say, some sort of a dualistic, which is out of favor by philosophers and scientists, but I sort of have a lifelong, shall we say, predilection for dualistic, but maybe with a more fundamental idealism view. And as I said, idealism and panpsychism is sort of in that category. And then I said, if that's wrong, if I'm told by ultimate reality that you got that wrong, what's your next choice? The next choice would be some sort of a quantum-based system as a fundamental reality. Not, certainly not my first choice. And then if that's wrong, then I would jump all the way to the dark side and to sit next to Keith and say, Keith, you got it right with illusionism.
It's, here's an interesting, interesting convergence there. But I think the intuitions that support what I call phenomenal realism, do actually lead pretty much ineluctably to some form of substance dualism. And I think that is pretty much Dave Chalmers' position. I think he said something that ultimately you'd have to go there. So I think on most things I want to be in the middle, but I think here you'd really do have to choose between extremes. I don't think there's much middle ground. So I'm kind of with you there, except that I weight the things rather differently. But
yeah, it's not too far away from me either. I mean, I think the reason I'm attracted to illusionism, insofar as I'm going to go for physicalism, is that I buy the arguments that you can't explain consciousness. Let me qualify that. You can't explain phenomenal consciousness, irreducibly subjective consciousness in the terms of physical science. So if I'm going to be a physicalist, it's got to be an illusion. And Keith's kind of opened me up to the possibility of that.
What I thought. Exactly what I thought. Right.
This idea that, oh yeah, it's really qualia are really real, but they're just patterns of chemical signaling or something. Doesn't okay? Well, I've got to restrain myself from getting involved in so much more I want to discuss with you. But let's try and get in a couple more questions. Well, we've got 2 questions about Daniel Dennett here. We've got Phil over here. What do you think about neurophenomenology? And then sorry, let me and then question, what does Robert think of Daniel Dennett's contribution to consciousness studies? So neurophenomenology, Daniel Dennett, what are your thoughts?
So neurophenomenology is one category that I sort of knew about, but really explored when I was doing the landscape paper, and thoroughly enjoyed it. You can start with Husserl in terms of phenomenology, and then Varela, and in more recent times, Evan Thompson. I mean, it's a very rich area for exploration. And it takes phenomenology, it takes phenomenal consciousness seriously, but wants to put it into a scientific framework. Michel Bitbol was a recent interview I did in Paris, actually a few months ago. It's now on the Closer to Truth website. So he's one of the contemporary philosophers in this area, a superb philosopher. So it's a very important area for exploration. I guess my feeling, and it may be a prejudice, is that virtually everyone in neurophenomenology is loath to even approach the idea of substance dualism. And I think, as I see the arguments, they are very nervous because it seems to lead to a substance dualism approach. And they, of course, everybody that I've read rejects that and makes a big point. But it would seem that all their arguments lead to that, and then they reject it. And so to me, that's a very interesting nodal point about can you make progress? And they've suggested ways how you can scientifically measure phenomenology. I'm not sure those have been very successful in terms of actual operation. As far as Dan Dennett is concerned, I mean, it's hard to limit the superlatives that you can state. I've learned so much from Dan, from his papers, his books, conversations with him. His unique way of thinking is just enriched me personally as much as anyone. I disagree with his ultimate conclusion, but that in no way affects what I think of his arguments and how powerful they are and how important they are into our broad-based understanding. So it sounds odd where I would reject the conclusion. I think I joked him one time and said, Dan, I agree with all your arguments. I just don't agree with the final conclusion. But maybe it's my logical side and my emotional side. Who knows? But Dan Dennett has made a remarkable contribution to not just the field of consciousness studies, but our way of thinking about philosophy, about mind, about what it means to be human, about the nature of the universe. And we've all been enriched by his being among us.
Absolutely. That's famously, not famously, but that's Tim Williamson's response to the fine-tuning argument for God. Apparently, his response is, the problem is God doesn't exist. So that's anyway. Yes, some people are asking why we're so small. I think there's a link for laptops and a link for phones. But anyway, there's more questions, but I think we're kind of running out of time. I've got some hungry kids I need to feed. Maybe if we just finish by what do you see the future of consciousness studies and all? Do you have hope that we'll resolve this? How?
My hope is that the consciousness studies becomes more and more important. Let me, in all seriousness, make this point. When I started Closer to Truth and when we did Landscape of Consciousness, I had no interest in anything other than the particulars of the ideas. That's it. I had no eleemosynary approach to humanity or wanting to teach people or being helped. It was a selfish approach to really want to understand it myself. However, what I found happening, especially on consciousness, is that when we had a website and that became, the primary vehicle of distribution, we would get comments from all over the world. And I began noticing that the comments, and they were mainly addressed to consciousness or the existence question, God, consciousness, whatever, in terms of ultimate reality. So in those two categories, the comments were coming from all over the world and from people in countries that were at war with each other. And so literally we get from Iran and Israel, we get from Turkey, we get from Ukraine and Russia, we get from the Arab world, we get from Pakistan and India. And every person has the same passion for these questions, and nobody ever mentions what country I'm from or what my belief is. And even people who have very strong beliefs from the Islamic world and the Hindu world in particular are always appreciative of understanding and appreciating the fact that we take seriously all of these different views. And it occurred to me that these kinds of questions about ultimate reality and about consciousness are the greatest unifier of humanity. And I never had appreciation for that. Some people give me credit for doing it. I take no credit. My credit for wanting to do this was purely selfish, as I said, intellectually. But I now see that these questions really do have a unifying effect to humanity. So my hope is that these questions will be asked and become more part of the public discourse. And so that the superficial differences among human beings, be they nationalistic, ethnicity, racial, religious, whatever, all of those become subservient to these larger questions.
Wow.
Fantastic
I think
thought.
I'm moved to tears, actually.
Me too. You know, Philip, we've got to get Robert back on again. I mean, we've got to do more of these, and we need to get Robert back, because this has been far too. As someone said in the comments, it's gone, but an hour and a half has gone by so quickly. I feel the same. I just want this to continue. So let's see if we can do that. If Robert would spare the time.
Love to.
That was a fantastic sort of peroration, though. I mean, I think it's something we've all found that we get messages from people from all sorts of backgrounds who are interested in it, because it's the central concern, in a way, of being a reflective human.
It should be.
Yeah.
As I said, it's still a small subset of humanity. But if that became larger, perhaps some of the other superficial differences would diminish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Consciousness, the great unifier. Oh, thanks so much, Robert, for coming on. It's been absolutely wonderful discussion.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for taking time. And you know,
you both are my, not only friends, but I highly respect both of your contributions to the field. It's been enormous, and look forward to going at it together again.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
It absolutely does. And thank you for all your hard work you've put into this, because it's a fantastic resource. Absolutely.
Keith and I always say, there's all the disagreement. We just linked these 350 different theories, but at the end of the day, we all agree, that consciousness is wherever it is.
And nowhere else.
And I would say that it's more than you guys' two theories, though. It's not. In addition to your two, there are more than 350 others. So
there are 348 more.
Yeah. So just be a little humble.
Fair enough.
That's
fair enough.
Good message.
See you all. Thanks for tuning in. Have a happy holiday, however you're spending that.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Nice to see you again, Keith.
Pleasure.
Take care.
Take care.